Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to Chris and Negligence, a quickie reading for 2024. And if the last one was it was kind of a little bit harder to get through, to be honest, a little bit talking about Chris and what he thinks kindness is, because it's one of those things where you could immediately say Chris has no concept of kindness if it doesn't mean he's going to be rewarded with anything. But now we sort of move on to things that Chris is like lackadaisical lifestyle, aka not getting a job, not actually really getting anything beyond his monthly tugboat, is causing him, and it causes him to be negligent. And I'm not saying, again, this is like, of course you understand, this is not going towards, people who have autism or anything like that. I'm talking about people who are irresponsible and who are not responsible and accountable are most commonly negligent. Ah, yeah, big price items. Please, please buy those now so I can get this car worked on right now, today. Chris, after going well over a year without an oil change. I don't know why the hell he waited a whole year before he changed the oil, but oh well, you be the judge. Maybe just because Chris doesn't know what to do, or he just never bothered to do it because he couldn't be bothered to go out and buy some own oil for his car. And by the way, yes, the object of what a lot of people's immense dissatisfaction and scorn of Chris praying for people to send him money, all the while he's surrounded in this room by toys. Things he could sell, and things that this room is only going to get bigger and bigger again because Chris's priorities are all screwed up. If they weren't screwed up, he wouldn't be in this situation now, would he? It's not rocket science. And by the way, you notice as well Chris praying here, but he doesn't particularly look, even just the way he looks, he doesn't look particularly very sincere or like all the other things you would associate for people who are legitimately begging for contributions. Which we know fine well Chris wouldn't appreciate anyway because he squanders it on useless things that he just does not need. Merriam-Webster defines negligence as a failure to exercise the care that a responsible, prudent person would exercise in like circumstances. A negligent person frequently finds themselves in trouble caused by their own inability to identify a problem and deal with it properly. Chris is in no short supply of negligence, and it frequently leads to him trolling himself. Interesting, considering how much he complains about the trolls and how he has no accountability to actually look after himself. Again, even people on the spectrum are perfectly capable of doing this, and people who are more severely affected by autism than others are more than capable of being somewhat responsible. Not always, because again, this is a very case-by-case sort of thing, but you know what I mean. Examples of Chris's negligence. There are several examples of Chris's negligence that have been negatively impacted himself, his family, his community, and his fans. The effects of his negligence have ranged from letting his room go, to getting his eBay banned, to even possibly burning down his own house. Yes, and oh, definitely yes. Chris's failure to properly deal with problems often leads him into tricky situations that bring humorous responses. A significant portion of Chris's content can be attributed either directly or indirectly to his negligence. Vehiculars. Chris has a long history of vehicular struggles. His first car, the original Sonchu, went through horror as it was revealed in October 2010 that he went well over a year without changing the oil. Unsurprisingly, the car didn't make it much longer. Fast forwarding to July 2018, it became clear that Chris failed to learn from his lesson. In a begging video, Chris revealed that his 2010 Ford Focus was heating up and wouldn't start. Despite fans sending him money to get the car fixed, the car died 3 months later. It was reported by the captain that the car's engine was permanently broken, being that the car had only 110,000. The car only had 110,000 miles on it? And Chris's neglect was Chris managed to completely wreck an 8-year-old car just on his own? What? Look, guys, I'm gonna level with you with something right now. My car is 17 years old. It's done nearly 300,000 miles. It is sweet as a nut. You know why? Because I maintain it. I give it my family. We look after it. Because I bought it off my mother, and she looked after it, and we've had the car for over 10 years with us. But again, it runs sweet as a nut. It's a fantastic little runner. It's not the most powerful car in the world, yes, but that doesn't matter. I'm not a boy racer, you know what I mean? You look after things and you keep it clean, and you just change the oil, you service it, you go to mechanic, you look after your stuff, and your stuff will look after you. You know what I mean? Anyway, in 2021, a fan snapped a picture of the fourth iteration of Sonshu in the wild, featuring a dented rear door and smashed rear windshield with a plastic covering. Another fan texted Chris about the damage done to his van. Chris responded, revealing that he had backed into the trailer of a big rig. Yeah, and as you can see here, that does not look good. And again, the Sonichu license plate is a nice touch, especially if you want to be recognized everywhere you go. Something I don't even think most celebrities even want. Finances. We'll be covering a lot more of this in greater detail when it comes to Chris and his money, but the essentials are the following in relations to negligence. Since 2014, Chris has taken to eBay as a means to supplement his tugboat, capitalizing on his internet legacy. Chris began producing Sonichu medallions, custom amiibo commissions, autographed photos, family heirlooms, relics of Fail, and several other items that were not destroyed in the house fire. Almost as soon as Chris started ramping up his eBay presence, buyers began complaining. On eBay, feedback is incredibly important. Anything short of 90% positive feedback is considered very poor, and even enough complaints are levied against a seller. eBay will take action. Chris has struggled to maintain an 85% positive feedback percentage. Many buyers complain that Chris was taking too long to ship items, of items coming in broken due to faulty packaging, or of outright not receiving purchase items altogether. That's pretty bad. I'm surprised they didn't try to get Chris arrested for scamming people. They know fine well where Chris lives. One buyer even reported being sent an empty envelope after purchasing a bootleg Pokemon card from Chris in March of 2018. That's really, really bad. These complaints levied against Chris, frequently causing his PayPal to become frozen, preventing him from pulling funds out. This enraged Chris, as you might suspect, and resulted in him getting into scuffles with various buyers. In the Mr. Smith incident, a buyer opened up a dispute after Chris failed to make and ship a Sonichu medallion and commission with him the specified 2-week period, resulting in Chris' PayPal getting frozen. In response, Chris doxed the buyer on Facebook. Chris then proceeded to send an art of an exasperated Sonichu along with an angry-eyed Sonichu medallion. And we can just take a look at that right here. And then Chris went onto Facebook to actually explain the rationale behind the angry-faced Sonichu medallion. The buyer, refusing to lift the dispute until Chris sent the item described in the listing, eventually received a proper Sonichu medallion along with a full refund from eBay. Chris's eBay exploits eventually came to an end in June 2019 as eBay finally restricted his account after years of complaints. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I conduct my business on the internet through when I fulfill commissions for people, guess what? And let me tell you something right now, and I don't fuck around with people when this happens, is that I pay whether I pay somebody to do something or whether somebody is paying me, you do that with the intention of creating business relations. And you know what happens? If you don't fulfill the request, or somebody makes exceptions and doesn't fulfill the request that you pay for, guess what? You can and you should be taking these people to court. Because a court will say, even in the slightest provocation, is that messages between both parties would suggest that there was an intention to create business relations, and therefore that suitably acts as a contract in the eyes of the law. And when that happens, ladies and gentlemen, that's when you get involved. That's when, if somebody is shortchanging you, you report them to the authorities, you report them to the site that they are currently on, you spread the news about this, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is like outside of, Chris. There are people who do like art commissions, music commissions, anime, all that good stuff, and their livelihood depends on them having a great reputation, substantial portfolios of work, and proving to be a very, very reliable and incomparable self-proclaimed freelancer. When you're not any of these things, like Chris, is when these sorts of things happened. People who go into business for themselves and who are freelancing, they usually are very responsible and very, very accountable for the things that happen around their business. Unlike Chris, who will only ever do things when he is quote-unquote in the mood when describing how he makes the Sonichu medallions. Art. Chris has always viewed Sonichu and the series he headlines as his pride and joy, but to call his updates infrequent or inconsistent is an understatement. While personally attributing his slipshod schedule to the idea that his inspiration comes in and out, which on the surface is something that does affect those with creative persuasions, Chris has been known to go vast lengths of time without any news of the progress of his work. The most glaring example of this was Sonichu issue 11, a book first mentioned and conceived in 2009 that was effectively abandoned twice over the staggering long course of its production. Once in 2010, the wake of the infamously divisive Sonichu issue 10, and again 5 years later, shortly after Chris summoned up the willpower to dust off his work and after he was paid to produce more pages by two separate parties, a delay that lasted 2 more years with little in the way of clear explanation. Even when he was caught out on it, during the same time Chris was making death threats to Donald Trump and Mike Pence. In the Alec Benson Leary saga, over the course of numerous phone calls, Alec frequently took Chris to ask for his lack of consistent work ethic. In particular, he emphasized the importance of keeping to a schedule to maintain a constant level of external interest in his output. This is actually something that should be relatively very straightforward and easy for Chris. Remember, Chris doesn't have a job. He didn't have one since at least 2003, and he hasn't applied for a job since 2009. So, once again, Chris has all the leisure in the world, so why doesn't he just get on with it if he claims to be creative and that he can make money before through things like eBay? There, he attributed his diminished productivity to the existence and pressure of outside stressors. More specifically, he pinned the blame for his creative drought on the existence of ads on the Wikipedia, the presence of which proved to be so troublesome that he couldn't stand to look at them, and hence couldn't use the site to upload his work. This simply proves how easy it is for Chris to be sidelined, or to be put off work simply because other factors made him feel vaguely uncomfortable. It's almost as though the actual word work is something that Chris has taught himself to become allergic to. In the years since, he has often said that he hasn't taken up producing his comic due to the lingering presence of various external factors. That seems almost too vague for words, if you ask me. All of which can be boiled down to stress. Another likely reason for this crushing negligence, despite Chris's myriad explanations, is his lacking of timeliness, is that Sonichu isn't a work that's held aloft by any real creative inspiration on his part. Rather, most of the time, it's a semi-autobiographical account of Chris's own life, wearing the garb of a nonsensical fantasy realm. While the passing of his father in late 2011 doubtlessly impacted his drive, a combination of factors such as a lack of anything going on in his life, lingering discomfort regarding the events of Sonichu issue 10, and its perceived violation of his personal imaginary world, as Chris's own enduring laziness, even when paid $1,000 with the express purpose of making 100 new pages in mind, have ultimately led to his negligence smothering his creativity. Now, in my case, the only thing that's really stopping me from like producing more of my sort of work outside is ultimately due to a lack of finances to pay for people on commissions. But when it comes to actually writing material, there is no shortage of the things that I can do. In fact, there is even greater expedience because, again, I'm about it's like roughly 4.5 months away until my Microsoft Office license renews once again. So realistically, I have to produce so many things in 1 year just to actually get the value out of what I pay for with Microsoft Office, etc., etc. Housefire. Perhaps among the most consequential events in history, many have speculated that the fire at the Chandler residence may have been caused indirectly by Chris. According to the person who leaked the fire report, the fire appears to have been caused by a spark from an extension cord running through the bathroom door, of which the plastic coating had been rubbed away. The report seems to corroborate this claim, indicating that the fire started from the downstairs bathroom. Chris had run an extension cord from the bathroom to power a Keurig coffee machine in the hallway, which was plugged in at the time of the fire. How much of the blame that Bob shares for allowing the brazen fire hazard to exist, along with the Horde's role in the fire, however, is up for debate. Body. Although I will say is that how did Chris not notice immediately and also not try just put the fire out? Anyway, body. Something absolutely nobody, one of the biggest things Chris's negligence has affected, is himself. As mentioned plenty of times on this site, he has shown to not take anything close to good care of his hygiene or diet, no doubt causing various health problems that could potentially endeavour his very life. One notable example is Chris's eating habits, where he rarely eats vegetables or fruit, and when he does, he usually adds something extremely unhealthy. Also worth noting is his well-known lack of showering, leading to him smell horrid. Also, the degrees of rust and mold probably growing in Chris's bathroom, leading to other health complications, including urinary tract infections. Not something that's normally seen in men, but Chris found a way because, well, that's what you get. Causes of Chris's negligence. There are several potential causes of Chris's negligence. Perhaps the most apparent cause is Bob's own negligence. Several house tours of the Chandler residence shine a light on just how large the hoarding has become. Bob seems to have little regard for the squalor that she and Chris live in. The hoard seems to have started long ago, but absolutely exploded after the death of Bob. This would suggest that Bob had his own part to play in just how bad the Chandler residence got. Bob even commented on this during that infamous "That Is My House" video from August 2009. Although in that case, Bob was only really concerned that for some strange reason he thought that Greene County were just going to take no notice of this whatsoever, despite even the amounts of trash overflowing into the front yard. Another contributing factor could possibly be Chris's ego. Chris tends to see himself and everything he creates as flawless. In recent years, he has begun developing an outright God complex. It is entirely possible that this perceived flawlessness prevents Chris from being able to acknowledge any mistake he may make, causing problems for him down the road. These problems he encounters only further fuel his villainary complex. And to be honest, listen, it may seem it's rather short, but I will add a couple of things that I think are extremely relevant just before we leave this one off. Is that, I'm sorry, but you know what? It's just straight up not right, and it's also unacceptable. You know what? Chris not taking responsibility for his finances, and taking care of his pets, taking care of his own family, like his parents, and Chris just imagines this is somebody else's job to do. I'm sorry, but you know what, Chris? It's not right. It's got to be somebody's responsibility. And I don't care if Chris was never taught about responsibility or taught the importance of, looking after yourself and everything around you. Otherwise, shit hits the fan hard. But you know what? These are the sorts of things that you get taught about in school. So But then again, Chris missed like quite a lot of his early years. But why did like Chris like I think this is like almost one of those cases where you could say Chris is almost like a product of his environment, probably not helped by the fact that he sees himself as completely perfect and thinks that this is all just a part of the process. But then Chris is also the sort of person to say that if he didn't have autism, then he wouldn't be having these issues anyway. So I think it's a lot of bullshit around the Chandler household and the fact that Chris, well, was comfortably provided for, so there was no need to think that there was any method to change, or because it would involve him having to change and doing things that were inconveniencing for him. Even though, as mentioned again, Chris doesn't have a job, he could spend all his time writing and drawing the comics if he wanted to, and he could have had just about every single opportunity to ignore the trolls downright by not even responding to them. Chris could have done all of these things, but he chose not to. And whether Chris likes it or not, this is the result. This is what happens when you take no accountability or responsibility for your own actions. Please bear this in mind, ladies and gentlemen, and sort of almost use this as like a cautionary tale from like going forwards. Because, listen, whether it's like taking care of your house, your car, your pets, your business, anything like that, it starts with you. That's what it comes down to, ladies and gentlemen. And if you don't mind me, I've got several things I have to catch up on myself because, unlike Chris, I'm going to deal with them immediately. So take care, and bye-bye for now.